and enable the transcripts. All righty. So welcome everybody. I'm going to do this real quick. I'm just going to say we need to stay on time, so I'll try to give you as much time as possible, but the rooms are reused for the next session. So we had some technical difficulties there. If you have questions, please put them in chat and we can deal with those at the end. And I want to introduce Melinda Boland, and her talk today is about breaking down silos through, breaking down OER silos through a network approach. So Melinda, if you want to take it away, I'll give you as much time as possible.
Thank you. Hello, all. Thanks for joining me today. In this session, I'll discuss ISKME's work in the OER space, from the early days of OER Commons to our work developing communities of practice and networks of individuals who drive work in the field of open education. We'll also look at ISKME's platform evolution and how it too has moved to a more networked approach. We see the connecting of people and the connecting of resource silos as critical to the longevity of a healthy OER ecosystem. ISKME, which stands for the Institute for the Study of Knowledge Management in Education, was founded in 2002 as an educational nonprofit focused on conducting applied social science research around how educators perform continuous improvement on curriculum over time. We're excited to celebrate our 20th anniversary this year, but we're going to do some stuff. Building on that initial focus of continuous improvement on curriculum, our founder, Lisa Petrides, was part of the early global meetings focused on developing and defining OER. ISKME continues to conduct grant-funded research in the field of open education, and about 7 or 8 years ago, we started shifting from a fully grant and philanthropic funding model to a services model. And this shift contributes to our sustainability and longevity, helping us continue supporting open education worldwide. ISKME services include the development of digital libraries for OER, for state agencies, library consortia, higher education systems and institutions, NGOs, and also just unique projects. Our hubs and microsites are one part of an OER ecosystem that is made more vibrant through community development, professional learning, research, and curation of high quality resource collections. I don't know if any of you are aware, we have Go Open Michigan is one of our microsites with the Department of Education in Michigan, and we also have a hub on OER Commons for the Michigan colleges online. So these are some fun screenshots from the early days of OER Commons. With support from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, we launched OER Commons in 2007. Started as a spreadsheet of OER that was carefully developed from a limited set of resources. And from the outset, OER Commons was designed to be a free public digital resource where educators could find OER. Soon after its launch, ISKME began to develop the tools for sharing and collaboration that are still used on OER Commons today. Our first authoring tool, OpenAuthor 1.0, was launched in 2012 and was a place for educators to create and share OER. This was quickly followed by our groups feature, initially created for Hawaii's Department of Education in 2013. Groups are a critical tool in our toolbox, something our users can leverage to create their own spaces for collaboration and curation, but also something we and our partners use in our professional development work, creating a space for participants to curate and share and discuss OER. So we kind of think of those groups as sort of from the ground up spaces for curation. In 2014, we launched our first hub, and we now host over 50 hubs on OER Commons. Hubs are landing pages where an organization or a project or an institution can share their own curated collections of OER, develop and host multiple groups, share information about their OER projects, and track engagement. This is OER Commons today. Our platform has been very successful and is considered a critical piece of OER infrastructure globally. We find, however, that a core piece of the challenge of open remains, that OER is naturally disaggregated, siloed by creators and institutions, those faculty members who are working on their one course, but maybe not talking to other folks about their work. We don't want to replicate the excessive centralization that exists in the traditional publishing market, then we want to encourage and facilitate sharing while letting people access OER where they want and need it. We also aim for platform agnosticism, creating ways for our users to get the resources where they need them via download options, LMS integrations, or other Google Classroom kind of integrations. We seek to highlight the high quality OER via curation of collections and partner engagement. And by partner engagement, I mean working with our partners for our microsites and our hubs who are also curating resources into collections. So their work in sort of vetting and validating OER is a big part of that puzzle as well. We also seek to create the spaces that can facilitate community development and participation. We understand that the work of OER benefits from mentorships, collaboration, and cohort models. All of this is to say that ISKME recognizes the power of connecting people from different backgrounds to form networks. We seek to bring people together from across regions and contexts and roles in this work through networking and also through the tools we develop for our platform. When establishing an OER initiative, we advise our partners to bring together stakeholders from across their institutions, systems, or districts, considering the many roles involved in OER. ISKME is currently developing a playbook for the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board, which is part of a much bigger project where we're doing research and gap analyses and developing their digital library. We have a lot of work going on in Texas, but the playbook is designed to guide faculty and administrators through the development of an OER program at their institutions. And a thread that runs through that playbook is the need to identify a diverse set of champions from across the institution, including, but not limited to, administrators, instructional designers, librarians, faculty, and students. Having a coalition of stakeholders from different backgrounds and roles in an institution can strengthen an OER program by offering different perspectives around the value of OER. For example, students may speak to affordability in having their materials on the first day. Faculty may speak to the academic freedom inherent in developing an OER course. Administrators could see the improved retention rates in their programs as the primary driver. So there's lots of different angles to take the OER conversation depending on who you're speaking with. Finding those advocates may prove challenging, but asking around may be the best way to start to find the OER people at your campus. Developing that network within and outside of the institution will only improve the longevity of your OER program. Breaking down the barriers or de-siloing faculty, departments, librarians, instructional designers, students, and administrators, and connecting them to the overarching goal of equitable access to education is a powerful way to develop a sustainable long-term OER program. ISKME's work in developing and supporting communities of practice is at the heart of our success in open education. We've been involved in the Go Open movement for many years, and the majority of our K-12 partners have taken the Go Open pledge. The Go Open movement originated at the Department of Education. In the last few years, ISKME has shepherded this movement, supporting states and districts as they shift to OER. ISKME has also formed the Voices of Open group, a group of K-12 education champions and community members across stakeholder groups, including leaders, practitioners, researchers, families, students, and others, focused on increasing access and equity in education. This community-led project is advancing a shared vision for open education through a coordinated network that is diverse, inclusive, and distributed. I have a little link to their site if you're interested to see more. Another key part of ISKME's work, both grant-funded and through our service offerings, is professional development. This is a component of the work we seek to As a component of this work, we seek to create communities of educators who can rely on and support one another as they learn about OER or learn how to evaluate OER through different pedagogical lenses. It's been really fun to shift from just doing professional learning about what is OER to being able to apply different approaches to different pedagogical approaches to OER now that people understand that you can adapt it to different contexts. For our microsite partners, ISKME hosts a bi-monthly community of practice call. The goal of this call is for our partners to share their successes and challenges and resources, fostering their own relationships with each other. ISKME often develops prompts for the calls, focusing on emerging initiatives, plans for the fall, responses to pandemics, or other timely topics, and facilitates the conversation among our partners. Next week, we'll host our first partner summit for all of our hub and microsite partners. In this 3-hour virtual event, we've invited our partners to showcase their work around specific themes, such as maintaining a dynamic web presence, building the case for OER with metrics, making the most of open author, and building communities. Not solely focused on our service partners, we also seek out organizational partnerships, understanding that collaboration is critical in the field. We've partnered with organizations that share our mission and seek to join us in our goal of improving access to education. ISKME has partnered with CAST, for example, and for the past 4 years. Most recently, we just launched actually 2 nights ago, our first professional learning academy, Accessibility in OER, which is the first in a series of 3 academies that we'll be doing with CAST. And of course, day-to-day, our work is about connecting those OER practitioners with each other and with tools that they can use to share their work. From a technical perspective, ISKME looks for ways to support bringing cohorts of stakeholders together in digital spaces. As I mentioned earlier, this can be done using the groups and hubs features on OER Commons, but it can also be done in the unique context of our microsites, focusing on specific institutions or districts. When we began developing our microsites, we were less cognizant of the limitations of our approach to our technology and have had to create workarounds to support sharing among our microsite partners. As we have worked with our over 20 microsite partners over the years, we've learned so much about what they would like to share and what successful sharing might look like. This is ISKME's current model of OER Commons, hubs, groups, collections, and microsites. We kind of think of OER Commons as that main library downtown, with the hubs as sponsored wings in the library, and as groups as those big round tables you might see in a brick and mortar library. The microsites in our current architecture are standalone branches of the system. They have their own resource collections. They may have some of the same materials and some different. They have their own users and their own regional contexts. They have their own sponsored hubs and their own community tools, but they are kind of separate at the time now. ISKME's microsite partners include state departments of education, higher ed, library consortia, community college systems, and organizations that work with state agencies to deliver resources to educators. These differing contexts often mean that our partners have different needs about how they describe their OER, different ideas about how to organize their groups and hubs, and custom approaches to collection development. When ISKME started trying to address these unique contexts, we started with standalone instances of the OER Commons platform and customized each of them. In the end, this approach was not scalable, causing significant technical debt as we tried to maintain custom code bases across our sites. So OER initiatives often start with individuals and are inherently fragmented as a result, much of like we found with our microsite architecture. As programs emerge in institutions or even within systems, it's beneficial to look at how programs can be connected to the wider audience so that a wider audience will benefit from the development of OER and the best practices established in these unique settings. ISKME started re-architecting our platform in 2021, and we're moving toward what is called a multi-tenant environment. Rather than having individual houses for OER Commons in each of our microsites, we're building an apartment building where the apartments have largely the same layouts, but each tenant can pick their paint colors and design their interiors. In doing this, we're opening up to a new approach to sharing OER among our partners, and we're working with them to prioritize and refine that approach. ISKME's apartment building of digital libraries will allow us to grow the commons through what we're calling the OER Exchange. By supporting the sharing of resource collections and the contextualization of resource metadata, ISKME microsite partners will be able to follow and adapt collections of OER, adding them to their microsites and making them available to their faculty and librarian stakeholders. This will increase the visibility of high quality OER and will provide insights into where these resources are used. This is a screen grab from our OER Exchange prototype. It's demonstrating what a network of digital libraries might look like for administrators. Site librarians can see how many other microsites are subscribing to a given collection, as well as other metadata related to the collection, such as numbers and types of resources included. Network activity reveals what other members are doing with their collections, potentially prompting a site librarian to look at additional collections and consider adding them to their library. This page is showing what a site librarian might encounter when browsing the OER Exchange. They can filter collections based on the microsite where the collection lives, and we'll have additional filtering options to help them narrow their selections. So here's some screenshots from 2 of our microsite partners, Viva and Lewis, which are both higher ed library consortia. In this prototype, we're showing how their site librarians might view collections they have shared and those to which they are subscribed. So librarians can see what they're sharing out with the world, they can control that, and also subscribe to collections from other sites. They'll be able to search for specific resources using advanced search. And both of these sites include course ID information. So they have crosswalked their course information. So for example, if they're looking for a specific intro to bio course, for example, they can look at those alignments and use those as well. As I kind of said earlier, one of the main differences between ISKME's digital libraries is the metadata schema. So often a partner will have unique ways of describing resources based on their context. For example, the way that subjects are described will align to the organization of the institution and the naming conventions they use. It's important for users to have consistent naming conventions for their wayfinding. It depends on being able to identify their subject areas. The metadata mapping tool is a way for our site librarians to realign record metadata to their taxonomies when they bring in new collections. If a term does not have a direct correlation in its new library, it can be transformed into a keyword, so it's not lost data. You know, this is a pretty wonky librarian talk, but it's very exciting for our partners to be able to bring resources from other sites and then update the metadata so that it aligns with their approach to describing content. So once we move beyond ISKME's microsites and the OER Exchange, once we've connected our sites with each other and developed ways for our partners to share OER with one another, we really want to move beyond that. We have a grant, we're working with a grant from IMLS and doing research around what we call the Open Metadata Exchange. The idea is that we'll connect OER repositories from outside of our ecosystem as well. As we look ahead over the next few years, we'll seek to extend the OER Exchange into something bigger, while the OER Exchange will network existing ISKME digital libraries, microsites, and OER Commons to create an ecosystem of collection sharing among our partners, providing an easy centralized search and discovery experience. The Open Metadata Exchange is that next step, moving beyond our digital libraries to support the sharing of OER collections globally. So the idea is probably, using an API to connect other collections. So whether that's something like Galileo in Georgia or other repositories, we could connect them to this and all share the metadata. So the biggest challenge there is really deduplication. But it seems to us that this is the next step to making OER visible and easy to discover. As an open source project, the Open Metadata Exchange will allow for those externally hosted repositories to share their OER collections with the network to create a more robust ecosystem for sharing and developing OER collections. Repository administrators will be able to build their collections of OER from a vast exchange of OER that is used globally. And that's my time to ask for questions if you have any. Sorry, I always go too fast, but I'd love to hear from you if you'd like me to talk more about anything that I've shared today. I realized it was a lot. My goal was really to talk about how we've seen the siloing of OER projects and technology and really seeking to link them together. Not necessarily to break them down, because I don't think that's really a possibility, but to connect them.
So if you feel comfortable, you can unmute, or you can just put your question in the chat. And if you can't unmute, shoot me a text message. I've been messing with the mute settings, or just everything was not set properly after we had to change the link.
Are you all familiar with OER Commons and ISKME? You can tell me in chat if you can't be unmuted. So what I was talking about is actually for both higher ed and K-12. Thank you for the question. ISKME works across both K-12 and higher ed. In some cases, we have partners that have digital libraries that are K-12 through higher ed. So really supporting both. So most of what I talked about today is OER Commons, and what we're developing with the OER Exchange is something that will be connecting our microsites. So some examples are Go Open Michigan in the K-12 space, Open Viva in the higher ed space. So are you higher ed or K-12, I'd be happy to share some more links with you. Awesome. Are you familiar with Go Open Michigan? Yes, that's it. That's what we're talking about. So I'm sure you have this link, but just in case, here you go. And we work closely with Gina Lovelace to make sure that she's getting everything that she needs as far as resources and tools, and can continue to build out Go Open Michigan. It's one of our favorite partners. You'd like higher ed resources? So on OER Commons, we work, you can find higher ed resources throughout the site. If you go to OER Commons, we have a hub that we've developed, which is the Open Textbooks Hub. So this is really looking at courses, textbooks for higher ed. Here's a link. And if you scroll down here, you can see we've got collections of all kind of the primary discipline areas. And once you go into one of these, you can then refine your search parameters or use the filtering on the left to find what you might be looking for. We have indexed many the press books, OpenStax, all of the kind of big content creators. And you can also see the resources organized around those content providers down here. So there's a lot of great stuff in here. We found that a lot of people were coming to OER Commons saying, I want free textbooks. So we wanted to make those easy to find and collected them here in this hub. If you're in a community college in Michigan, you also have a space set up here in the MCO hub. So each college has a group on the Michigan Colleges Online Hub where you can begin to share your resources as well. And these are collections that are being curated through Michigan. So you can see the colleges here. So feel free to join your college group if you're in the K-12 space. If you want to see more of the tools and features of OER Commons, I'm happy to do a little bit of a demo there too. Anything y'all are interested in learning, I'm here for you. You've got me for another 20 minutes.
Hi, Mindy. I've used the create the OER, when you're doing your own thing, and I thought that was a wonderful tool, and it's really easy to use. And I really love how you put the hubs and the collections together now. I've been watching this over the years. It looks great.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so we do have this authoring tool built into OER Commons called Open Author, and it is a very lightweight tool for creating and publishing OER. You would just sort of, here's my Mindy's resource. And then you can create a series of sections and then publish them. You can also import if you've created content in Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive and bring it in. You can share notes to instructors who may want to use your materials. And then once you've published it, other users can come and they can download it in multiple formats or just access it through their learning management system using an LTI tool. So it is a nice low risk, low barrier to entry tool for creating OER. We have worked with some partners to create full courses in Open Author as well. So this is something where we often set up a course shell for them in the back end, and they're able to sequence those lessons together into units, creating a whole course like you see here for Texas government. So it's been fun. And now that we are moving into that new multi-tenant environment that I talked about in my presentation, we'll be able to do a lot more to develop Open Author and make it more usable for folks. So we're really excited to begin able to do work on our tools and features. Kevin, what campus are you at? if you have colleagues that are you're at a community college, great. So I would in Michigan, I'm assuming, I would suggest you join the group on the Michigan Colleges Online Hub, and probably can find some colleagues through that group who are also doing work. But if not, you can still join the group and begin creating folders, organizing resources that you find, and starting to adapt, if you're a faculty member, starting to adapt your syllabus to incorporate OER. So OER Commons and Open Author are both free, and you can access OER Commons without an account. If you want to create using Open Author, you do need to register. The groups as well are free to create. You just go to the groups page and click create a group. If you wanted to be a part of a hub, there is a service fee for the hubs. So we would work with you to kind of develop a proposal and all of that. But anybody can go and create a group and begin to share with other folks on your campus, for example. Maybe I should have framed my presentation as a basics of OER Commons. Who knew? There's a lot of great tools and materials on there, so I certainly recommend that you visit OER Commons, do some searching around your specific course area. You'll find a lot of high quality OER that you can use right away.
Yeah, and I do apologize. I know some people joined late because we had the trouble with the links. So feel free to ask a question, and you feel you missed something, we'll clarify. I think we have all the links worked out. Finally, phone has been blowing up during the session to make sure we've got all that stuff.
I'm sure. So I did add my presentation to the SCED thing. So you can download the slides there. I could probably run through the whole thing again because it took me about 15 minutes, but it's really what I'm trying to talk about in my presentation is kind of what ISKME has learned as far as developing networks of OER practitioners, and then also developing networks of OER websites and tools so that we can kind of all benefit from the work of each other and learn from each other. But also I'm just sharing about OER Commons. So if people have questions about the platform, I'm really happy to answer those as well.
I have a question about the builder tool again. So
Yeah.
do you see that it would go a route of being able to like import other items such as like, downloaded press books or something, or something where then like people could then remix it like a remixing tool?
That is definitely something on our roadmap that we want to do. We did it a little bit with OpenStax where we were able to import the full text of those OpenStax books. So for example, if I go to search, we downloaded their XML and imported it into Open Author. So if you go, this is this one. So here you can see the oops, confused my computer. I like the old layout better. So I'll go here. But here at the top, you can see the kind of the chapters and all of that. And so we did bring the full text in. So that is certainly something that we want to do. We want to support folks, being able to remix with a low barrier to entry. But we have not been able to do that with Pressbooks as yet. But there's more material being developed. We're working with the Tennessee Board of Regents, and they have a whole program where they're creating full courses on Open Author too. So more and more we're seeing folks create kind of full course content in there.
But you could probably, imported like through Word instead of a Pressbooks document. Like if they had
Right,
another
you could do like
file,
one by one, slowly kind of through a chapter.
another
Yes,
file.
it would be, it's a pretty long process for a
Yeah,
full book, but yes, you can absolutely, copying and pasting is not a problem.
right. It's just timing.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just mention again, ISKME has done work both in K-12 in Michigan, if I can type correctly. We developed the Go Open Michigan microsite, which you can see here. So if you're a K-12 educator or K-12 adjacent, here is your Michigan contextualized tool for OER. We have also, one of our earliest hubs on OER Commons, in fact, is the Go Open Michigan hub. So we can access that down here. And we have a question, as a K-12 starting OER, do you have any suggestions? If you are using Go Open Michigan and you are an educator, I would suggest you start to look at finding resources that meet your kind of your standards goals. They've done a lot of work in Michigan to align OER to the Michigan state standards. So you can begin kind of developing your lesson plans and your planning for the year using those tools. They also have developed, let me get down here, all of the Zoom things are in my way. They've also got some professional learning tools here and some computer specific work that they've done, but you can just use the Go Open Michigan site to find material. So I don't know what level you're teaching at, but say you're looking for something to teach geometry. Most of our users are just doing a keyword search and jumping in there. You can filter on the left here. So again, you can filter by those education standards, by subject areas, by education level. So if you are not, doing high school, for example, you can go to a different education level. You can filter by material type. So what this is referring to is kind of the level of granularity of the resource, what kind of resource it is. License types. So these are basically kind of organized by most open to least open. And underneath these, you'll see those Creative Commons licenses. The content source is referring to whether it's our deprecated OpenAuthor 1.0 or the newer OpenAuthor, or content provider resources are things where we link out to the web. So for example, you can see here, we're linking out to the illustrative mathematics resources. And then further down, there's other ways to filter, who is this for? Is it student facing, for example? What kind of media format, education use? And then the providers is really easier to kind of look up here to see the full set of content providers that have been indexed on a site. So in the case of Go Open Michigan, you can see where they have found resources from all these different sources, in addition to those that were created on the platform. So depending on your role in K-12, there's a lot of ways to get started. If you're trying to kind of build a network and engage with other folks in your district, finding out who those folks are and starting the conversation to build a plan for, rolling out a plan for rolling it out to your teachers and getting them engaged in using OER in their courses is really the way to go. So jumping in and trying it out. There's a question about clicking on remix. So that was in OpenAuthor. If you click on remix, it takes you to an edit view where you can edit the resource, and it creates a new version that is your remix of that resource. You bet. I think my slide is gone, but my email address is here. If any of you would have further questions or want to learn more about working with ISKME or having me connect you with folks in Michigan with whom we work, I'd be happy to do that as well. So there's a lot of terrific OER work happening in Michigan, and we're excited to be a part of it.
Thank you. I'm gonna stop the recording, but we still do have a few minutes, so I'm not gonna close the room.
Okay.